Let's begin. And Mr. Waters had suggested that we go through his draft report, which I think is a great idea. And do you want to lead us through that?
Did you want to talk about Gary's first?
Yeah,
mentioned
do you want to
Oh,
address
well,
Gary
to
as
kind of
we get to
follow-
those? Okay,
yes,
let's
as we
follow
get to
along.
those.
So, under the I guess on page 1, under the recommendation under number 1 recommendation, that set of question marks is going to read $18 million.
Yep.
Is there anything else on this page?
Gary had a couple suggestions where we talk about, let's see here, revise. His question is, in my opinion, the primary purpose of the bond is to provide a financial bridge and funding to allow the district to be able to build its capital reserves. It's just a statement. Does anyone disagree with that?
I don't disagree.
No. And then he had one other, he changed one word. He suggested that we make a change from the word might to should. Assess value.
And what number?
Under 1, about midway down, if the AV shows better than expected growth, the amount of the bonds issued might be reduced. He's suggesting that be changed to should be reduced.
Mr. Chairman, my thought on that is that we by saying should, I guess it could be a recommendation that we want it, that the board should reduce it, but it also removes some of the flexibility that staff may have or needs that might arise
It's something else.
if something else pops up. I think, that they feel like we need to do, and we need to go ahead and include that in our next bond sale, whatever that is.
So to clarify for anyone that's listening or for the committee here, the thought there is that if the AV was to have some skyrocketing appreciation opportunities, and that afforded the governing board to then say, hey, instead of using the bond, let's just pay cash for this project, that's an option and a prerogative that they would always have anyway. So I think creating a should or a tethering that this is what's going to happen, because it's again about the principle of the bond happening over this time, or going, hey, we had this AV, this appreciation in AV, let's just go buy this stuff and pay cash for it. It may create an impact to the resident, because even if the AV goes up, and you're still.
You have to.
The levy's got to come from somewhere. The money's got to come from somewhere. So I think you do want to be very careful about setting a precedent, because if the AV does go up, and this is a recommendation, but it's just, I think you want to be, there are some semantics.
So it sounds like there's a consensus to just leave it the way it is and not change
Might
it to
or
should.
may. I think
May
may sound like a better word than might, but I mean that's just wordsmithing. And I think at the end you're probably going to want to try to have Tricia do the wordsmithing, so she may determine that may sounds better than might. It means the same thing, but
Yeah, I think once the committee gets the correct ideas on paper, then Ms. Trish will fix it.
Any other comments on that first page? On page 2, any comments or changes recommended? Gary did have a question on page 2. I think it has already been answered under general obligation bond revised 5-6. His comment was, is the bond for 20 or 25 years? And Chief Casey, I believe you addressed that a little while ago.
I did. So whether the verbiage needs to, stay over an estimated 25-year time period, the bonds will be repaid back at the appropriate repayment schedule or something. I mean, if you even need to say that, but I'm just, because like I said, some are at.
But it wouldn't exceed 25, correct? Or would it?
It would not exceed 25, or it would likely not exceed the 25 years. Remember, there's a lot of variances in what fire districts can and can't do, so the best practice is to keep within 25 years. But if I recall correctly, we could go longer if you wanted to. You could go shorter. There may be a point in time again where the board says, hey, listen, let's just do a 15-year repayment schedule, and we're okay with that, or for whatever the reasons it is. So, you know, the terms of it, the projections show a 25-year total repayment schedule for 3 different bond sales. We may do 2 bond sales and not do the third one. And that may create, you know, but still should be paid back within 25
So
years.
would we leave it as written, or should we say maybe up to 25 years?
Yeah, yeah, we could do that, you know.
Yeah, and then that'd be an end.
And again, the governing board will make that determination as to what the terms are, how long they'd like to have the repayment schedule take, what the debt service is on that. Because you may say, listen, if we do a 15-year repayment, here's the interest rate, and here's what it's going to cost us in interest, versus a 20-year repayment schedule. And they may say, listen, that's a pretty big savings, but that'll be decided by that board, not by this committee.
So, was there a suggestion that we modify that slightly to clarify?
We're gonna say, up over, up to 25 years.
Okay.
And Dave, are you going to then wordsmith this?
will-
You'll make another final
I
draft?
will, and then send it to
For
Tricia.
wordsmithing and finalization of the draft.
Correct.
Okay, just
Unless-
making sure, it says Tricia's taking notes, I wanna make sure if I gotta take those.
Well, I think we all, at least her and I, and maybe you should take notes in between the
Yep.
3 of us. We'll make sure that we
Okay.
address all the committee's corrections and concerns.
Copy that.
Correct.
Okay, page 3. Any changes to findings of fact? Yes, Gary has an issue with, let's see here. It's the 1, 2, 3, the 4th item down, the 4th bullet point. The committee considered the option of bonding just the station rebuilds. And then there's discussion, however, the cost to taxpayers for a $50 million bond is more than the cost to the taxpayer for an $18 million bond. Gary's comment is, how can this statement be true? Over the life of the bond, the cost to the taxpayer is $3 million more, plus associated cost.
How can that be true?
Well, I was just basing it on the numbers that Gabe sent to us, the tax comparisons. If you look at the total, I just kind of went out and said, if you look at the total over $15 million, what the taxpayer pays, the $950, $1,005,000, $1,063,000, all the way across, versus 18, the 18 numbers are actually lower. Last page of the taxpayer comparison there. So that statement may not, in fact, be the right wording, but over this 10-year period, it certainly is.
So maybe what, you don't reference that in a 10-year lifespan, so maybe we need to preface it with in consideration of a bond, when considering the difference between a 15 and an $18 million bond, the cost over the initial 10-year period actually costs the taxpayer less because the
Explain.
amortization of the projects in the first 10 years are greater.
I guess, because it's only $3.50.
Still less.
Right.
I didn't give an amount. I said it's less.
And that's based on the average cost of a home.
Correct. It's on the 340.
Right, right.
And Mr. Chairman, I believe that if you were to, take the same, take $1 million home, I mean, that it's gonna be the same mathematical equation, right? I mean, it won't be the
Right.
same dollar amounts, or
Right.
the percentages will be different because there's different amounts, but the concepts that are appreciated in there are the same.
Well, 1465
is
is,
the last year. I
is-
should
No, that's
say.
the no bond.
That's the no bond.
That's the no bond, Dave.
Yeah.
the 15 million,
Oh, I'm sorry, you're correct,
you're looking at a $4.40
correct.
difference.
So, and maybe that's such a
Shouldn't have-
minute amount that maybe that whole
Should go away.
finding of fact should go away.
I think it should.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just more convoluted.
Okay.
I agree, Chairman.
Do you want to say anything as it relates to the relationship to the number that you're bonding versus capitalizing and the capitalization in the budget has a direct impact, immediate impact to the taxpayer or something? I think that's what you were trying to say in this.
Didn't we kind of say that?
Maybe you do.
Under the options considered, page 2, under pay go?
You may be very right. I'm just trying to, and taking it away is completely fine. This is your
Yeah.
documentation and, Mr. Chairman, you're on the other side of the coin gonna be,
Just the last sentence under pay go, page 2. The committee is also very concerned that this form of funding would cause dramatic and sustained increase in the mill rate, forcing current property owners to pay for assets that future property owners will enjoy. But we can get into the weeds on numbers if you think we should. Has a finding of fact.
Now, do you want that in here, or do you want to just, you can be available, so if any of the board asks you about that, to explain
think
it
it'd
at
be-
that time?
your mic went off, it's red. It might be the battery died maybe, or? Oh, did we start recording?
Yeah, mine's on.
Yeah, I get it. You could get that.
Oh, mine's red too.
One on the podium.
Mine's red.
Oh, this one's working. I got it. It was just that one. So do we want to have as much information in this document as possible so that, okay.
Public document. Yeah, I think it should be. Okay, so,
Okay, did you get that? Because I was paying attention to the microphones and not to you.
well, I think it sounds like that the committee wants to have a statement of fact that describes the relationship of the pay-go side versus the bond and the immediate impact that the pay-go side would have or does have. Did I hear that correctly?
On the mill rate,
On the mill rate and therefore
total.
the current property owners.
yeah, I think that makes more sense than how this is worded. I think replacing it with what you just described,
Just rewrite that whole little,
Yep.
right.
okay, makes sense. I would appreciate that. And Lonnie will appreciate the next statement. No micromanaging.
Okay, anything else on page 3?
I'm just doing some math here real quick. I know how that statement was correct. It's about 31 over this whole 9 years of the payback of the debt. It's about $31. You'd pay $31.80 less on the average home to do the $18 million bond over this lifetime aggregate. Does that make sense? 15 versus 18
Then
million.
pay go.
I did 15 to 18 million.
Oh, okay,
So
okay.
by doing the $18 million bond, you are actually paying less aggregately, annually, or individually, and then aggregate is $31.80. It's fairly minor. It's, you're gonna pay $10,729 in taxes, or you're gonna pay $10,698 in taxes. I would beg to say it's pretty much the same. So.
The statement was correct.
So it is less, but it's a very
is.
limited impact. I guess the
Yeah.
question so the lens we should be looking at is understand that we spend a lot of time in this document. And while we don't want a 70-page, this is gonna be, with all the attachments, it's gonna be a large document, but the appendixes will be broken out and they're referenced very well to go find the detailed information. But for a resident who's considering whether or not we should consider this $18 million recommendation, to be able to clearly see these facts are very important for the viewing public at home, or when somebody's questioning whether or not this is a good idea. So having the right statement of facts in there is really critical, even though we know it all, and know it all meaning, because we've been in this,
Document.
arrangement for 25 hours now. We want those folks to be able to read very quickly and get a highlight of what this really impacts them. And so the difference, if we're worried about a $15 million bond or an $18 million bond and it impacting the homeowner, there's not much of an impact to the
But, so
homeowner.
I'm changing my mind, so I agree that we should have a general statement, but I think he's right. That at some point, someone's gonna say, what's the difference, I think we should go 15.
We can
because it
leave
just
this,
sounds better.
we can leave the statement that I originally had in there and maybe expand it a little bit with the $34 or some
And have an
example.
additional
And then add either an additional findings of facts or just add to this same one the impact of, as we just said, the impact of pay-go to the
tax-
taxpayers, how quickly it causes mill rates and everything to go up.
So at the end of this bullet point, there'll be, oh, I see it right there, see addendum, and then it'll just be a clearer picture of that. Okay.
So then to be clear, to take it one step further, at the end of the day, when you talk now the whole life of it, back to Gary's question, how can it not cost more? It does cost the taxpayer on the estimation $184 more over that 25-year.
Years.
$184 more is what it would cost the taxpayer.
And I think we should break that down again, like
Right.
everybody does. $180 more, and
Divided
so
by-
it's this much,
Divided by
Per year.
25 years,
right. I appreciate that.
divided by 25 years, it's costing the average homeowner $7.37 more a year to borrow $3 million. So the talking point there is, if you're considering why we're going to 18, it's actually gonna cost you $7 more a year as an average.
And the benefits are
And the benefits-
exponential.
Yeah, see, that makes more
Far
sense
away.
because
that.
this is really for 10 years. The savings here is for the 10-year period.
Correct. Yeah.
So I,
$34 savings
Yeah.
is for 10 years.
my concern is that I think doing it the way you've described it is better because I think people can get into a little debate about this. Well, you're talking 10 years. Over 20 years, that's not true. Why'd you put that in there? You're just trying to make this look better than it really, I mean,
Right.
that's why I'm concerned about that.
Over the life
Put all
of,
the numbers in
yeah,
that.
over the life, you're really talking about over the life of the
Yeah,
of
we
the
don't-
bond, 15 versus $18 million. It turns out to be about a $7.37 difference annually.
Yeah, I
Or
wanna hear
100
about the whole life. I don't wanna hear about a 10-year block.
Right.
True, so.
Yeah, I think that would be good, and I think that the last sentence is also, and that's important. The bonding, the additional $3 million provides the district flexibility in managing unforeseen capital. Now, the operating part, though, why is that in there? Because we can't use the bond money for operating.
Because
operating.
the flexibility might come from the operating side. In other words, the board and the chief may say, we need, we've had this other operational need come up that we're gonna pay go, and therefore this that we were gonna pay go needs to go to the bond.
Okay.
Or vice versa.
And the concern about the mill rate, the concern with the assessed value, if it was to decline, creating a unplanned increase in the AV. That $3 million placeholder, if we went to just 15 million, it would allow that the $3 million gives us that more capacity in the mill rate wherever it's needed if we have a decline in assessed value. Does that make sense?
Yep,
Does
to
that
me.
make sense to you?
Oh,
Thanks.
I'll see how well I can
Write it?
write it, yeah, that's right. Anything else on page 3?
Page 4.
Now, are we making a recommendation for the CMAR process as opposed to the
Design, bid, build?
design, build? Is that what, did we vote on that, or do we even need to? Is that the
I
board's-
did not make it a specific recommendation. All I did was word in here has a finding of fact that it may prove you know, that it's beneficial for stations 4 and 5, and it may prove beneficial for the other projects as well.
And for the taxpayer.
So do we, it sounds really good, just like it is, but do we wanna make it a formal recommendation? Do we believe that the CMAR is the best process, and we,
I think it says that, though. It says committee believes that the CMAR process would likely provide the overall best.
I think she's asking, Gene, should it go under committee recommendation to the board? So on page should that be a number 7, on page 2?
Okay.
I would be supportive of that.
and then that explains now why we support it. This, what you've written here, that's what I believe to be true. Cause, going through that, listening to all them, and then having gone through this years and years ago and hearing it again, it just seems to make more sense. If we're gonna try to, save money or be more efficient, this is the way to do it.
Yeah, and if you think about that, Ms. Maxwell, when I think about some of the questions about, hey, can you move the training room over there? Again, sounded like a great solution or suggestion. And if we say do that, the architect just does it, right?
Right.
And I go, good, now here's your bill, it's, $6 million. And you're like,
Right,
why so
what?
much?
What?
Well, you said you want to move it, that's really not a good idea, but we didn't have that conversation. The CMAR allows that conversation and that synergy for us to kind of go, yeah, but that's not gonna value this, or it's not gonna get us that, or
Right.
you could do this, what about this suggestion?
It's so proactive
Yes.
for what we're trying to do that it makes.
Is the committee supportive of including the CMAR discussion as a recommendation?
Yes.
Lonnie?
Okay, that'll be done. Did Gary have anything on page 3
No, he didn't have anything on page 3 or 4.
or 4? Okay, any other changes on 4? Concerns? 5, we definitely need to revise the wording for Station 3, and if nothing else, we'll just need to revise the wording a little bit to reflect some of the committee's concerns as it relates to the living side of the remodel, and change those numbers just a little bit to reflect the new numbers that we have from core.
And that would include the concept of maybe evaluating need and opportunities based upon either bond capacity or pay-go options at the time, or something like that. Right? Is that what we had a pretty lengthy discussion about?
Any other comments on page 5? Page 6? Gary did have some comments on page 6. Under apparatus. I think this one's already been answered. It is not clear to me, are we bonding vehicles that have a service life of less than 18 years? For example, I think it is reasonable to use bond funds for engines and water tenders, but not for staff vehicles. And I think that's,
Yeah.
Correct. So we're absolutely not considering anything as it relates to staff vehicles of any sort. It would be large, heavy stock, as we call them, heavy fleet. So if that needs to be clarified any better in there, that's to your purview, but,
I think it's pretty clear. He had another comment on that last sentence. In fact, I think it's underlined here. The committee believes these apparatus replacements are necessary and in some instances long overdue. And what Gary states here is how long is, quote, long overdue? Which vehicles are long overdue for replacement? I think if we are going to make this statement, it should be defined.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Seems like I just remember when about 3 weeks ago, the first time Chief Pachura presented us with that spreadsheet, whatever it was, that there were some that we already have engines that are kind of past due replacing, and we've been putting it off. So that's where I got that statement from. I don't have strong feelings that it needs to remain there.
Yeah, I would say that our apparatus fleet is in some cases aging, and, and some of the, the water tenders are getting up there and things like that, but we have had some replacements of engines in the last couple of years. So you may choose to
End it at our next-
not use the commentary
Yeah.
or create opportunities for folks with long overdue as being vague and, in
And
the eye of the beholder.
If we were just to get rid of that after our necessary, and then add implementing this schedule, this replacement schedule as a top priority.
Yeah.
Just pull that out, that
Okay.
makes more sense.
I like that.
Okay.
Is everybody in agreement with that change?
Yes, sir.
Okay, any other comments or changes, suggested changes on page 6? On page 7, Gary had one more comment here.
And don't you think that, at the first paragraph, the bottom of the first paragraph that you've got underlined needs to change a little bit too? To reflect that maybe committee believes that some,
Yes, it
Someone,
definitely
you know.
needs to change because we changed some numbers,
Yeah.
so.
alright, pick that up.
So in that middle of the paragraph there, just we were saying 2.975 to 3017, just talk about the hybrid being recommended, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And what did Gary, sorry, have to say? I
Okay,
apologize.
Gary said, on the sentence with the committee encourages the board and staff to look at funding capital reserves annually. He says, this sentence should apply to all items in the CIP except the construction of the new fire stations. I would include station number 4 and station number 5 as examples of where bonding would be appropriate.
I agree with that clarification too.
So that sentence should also appear at the bottom of the apparatus or finding of fact on page 6.
That's probably where it needs to be.
I almost think it's like a finding of fact type
Yeah.
of thing. Or
So it just,
recommendation.
it just becomes
It does- yeah.
it needs to be its own bullet point. Okay.
Yeah, not in that section, correct?
Right,
It's a blanket
Pull it out
statement.
of there.
The other part that he commented was, are we proposing SFD use bond funds to pay for items that have a service life of less than 10 years? And so, again, the repayment schedule will be such that it will get paid back if appropriate. Some of those microwaves, some of those things that are in telecom that may or may not have, because of technology, have 20-year lifespans, even though some of the stuff we're using has lasted 20 years. The best practice of trying to get, in compliance, we would get paid back appropriately. So I'm not sure how if you're worried about, and that 10-year comment, I guess, is just really the crux of that question.
Yeah, Chief, could we maybe address that comment back on page 2 under the general obligation bond and just maybe write a sentence in there that says items that are bonded will be paid, the bond will be paid before the life of that particular, something along those lines, before the life of that particular item expires. So because something that's got a 10-year life, will be sure the stifle, whoever will make sure that that bond is 10-year or less bond, correct?
Correct. So something about bond repayment schedule or structure will be such that any items paid for through a bond, will be paid for prior to the end of their life expectancy.
Yeah.
And I would like to use the word always, and that's a mandate that
Yeah,
we would
always.
always
Yeah,
Okay.
always.
be paid for.
So that goes up on page, on page 2 and 3 under that thing, okay.
Makes sense.
So then are you striking, you're already moving this other, so the
Moving
question
that
then,
other one to another separate bullet.
okay, and a finding of fact or under the
Yes,
recommendation?
well, I believe, well, maybe it should be a recommendation. No, I think, yeah, maybe it should be a recommendation. So page 7, that last sentence that we talked about making its own bullet, should that instead be a recommendation number, whatever that is, 8?
I think that's what we are doing, was listening to the discussion, we're recommending to the board, and, you know, that it's a true recommendation
Does that, yeah.
to the board.
Yep. I like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's something like in an effort to be proactive and creating a, you know, best practice, forward-thinking financial plan. Any capital items going out should begin to be funded through the capital improvement plan or capital improvement fund for future allocation,
Something like
something, you know, something of that nature.
Alrighty, so that, we're to,
Addendums.
we're to addendums. Does anyone have any suggestions or comments on addendums that are listed here as being attached? Is there anything else that we
Well,
need to
we-
attach that we're
We,
missing?
we need to attach that new one that you're gonna be reworking, that we just talked about the length of the bond and the associated cut in that same paragraph on 7.
We don't,
So-
yeah, I guess, I don't know, is that something Gabe will work up, Chris, or are you gonna work that up, or?
Give me a repeat on that question, sorry.
On the top of page 7 in that paragraph, when we talked about, I think it's 7, when we talked about the costs,
No, it's,
was it, where was it?
it's
Sorry.
page 3, midway down, that,
Oh, right. About changing that, there'll need to be a new, addendum of some sort, a new spread.
where we're talking about saving 34 or costing 34 over 10 and 184 over 25.
Explain
Is
it.
that already in Gabe's spreadsheet, or do we need to have him work that up?
We have something that's so clear, when they
Yeah.
read that, they can turn to that and go, oh, that's what you're talking about.
So,
See, that's only
Very
yeah,
clear.
so I
And
would,
not convoluted.
I would say, well, that happens as it relates to this page number 6 of 7 is where I just deducted the 1105 from the 921, which was the $15 million bond from the $18 million bond,
Right, just
overall
make it
cost.
clear.
So I think what we need to do at some points would be where it's, could be directly attributed to, even in that bullet point, might be addendum 6, page 5, you know, is where that number comes from. So we can kind of footnote that, if you will, for anyone that's gonna be looking to find, where'd you find that? Or so we can find if someone questions us and like, oh, I got all these pieces, you know,
Yeah,
there's,
you're not looking at
you
6
know.
or 7 things on there, you're
So
looking
it
at.
Yeah.
would be
two.
addendum
Okay.
10, page 6, I believe.
correct. 15 mil versus 18 mil, or something like that, you know, as a reference, so someone can see where'd you get that number from.
Okay.
And
Now-
should we always include the no bond rate in that? So they can still see where we're going at the no bond rate? If someone goes, right?
I think that's really important information.
Okay, add no bond.
We're cutting out as we go. Oh, no, I take a break. I'll just replace it. So,
Testing 1, 2.
It's on.
It needs dying, I think.
getting tired. Okay, I got, mine is working. If anyone else needs another 2 batteries, I got 2
There you
more in
go.
here that we can use. So the only challenge will be we're looking at this, a 20-year cost that we're basing that on right now, okay? So, this other one, we'd have to really make out a 20-year budget and try to really make that add I mean, like, I don't know if we know that. I mean, we could really project a 20-year budget, but that's pretty far out in, as far as,
Pretty hypothetical.
yeah, like we just don't know some things that we don't know right now.
Well, then you need to just be more clear on just that addendum, that this is just a
Just a 10-year.
10-year example projection, because it'll be too hard to, or just say that. This is a 10-year projection.
Yeah, don't say, don't, it's gonna be too hard or anything. This is based on a 10-year projection.
Yeah.
That's it, period.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
But I
Chief-
like that information. I think it's really good information for comparison purposes.
Okay, so those three, it'll be no bond, 15 mil and 18 mil. That's good.
So, I got a mess going on over here now. So, committee, we're gonna create these addendums. I know someone that can take very good care of said work to collate this into, appendix and with tabs and, or whether it's this will probably get PDF'd actually, and so there'll be separate pages or whatever we do to make this really a fine report that'll be electronically able to be referenced and things like that. So we'll hyperlink all this stuff, and we'll make this all work. If we do this right, I'd like to see us so that when you're on that, and you see that reference, it'll be hyperlinked in the document. You can touch on it, and it'll go right to that page that's referencing, right?
That'd be wonderful.
So we have all the ducks in a row that we're doing this. I'll have a comment at the end of this whole thing. So the question becomes, do we need any more addendums, and which documents are we providing? Are we providing the final documents, or every document that we rolled up to it?
The final documents.
Final.
Just making sure, so.
Right.
Yeah, so
Just
for
the final
core, for example, addendum 9 should be.
The latest and greatest.
Yeah, core's latest and greatest. Addendum 10 should be Gabe's latest and greatest, and we don't have that yet, because one of the things that we're close, but one of the things that I've asked Gabe for, and I think is still relevant and is going to change some of the no bond numbers, is when he brings this mill levy, as the chief talked about earlier today, to 325 in years 9 and 10, and then probably, and I don't know how much farther forward the 325 needs to happen, but probably even a couple of more years, because we can't legally obviously get to 328 and 335.
Right.
So that should be, I think it's important that we have that new spreadsheet from Gabe, and then be able to address those numbers. So that'll be the latest, greatest from Gabe. And Chief, as it relates to Gabe also, the last question I have is, based on the recommendations that we worked on today, we're showing a total capital expenditures here of $26 million over the 10 years. I know that a couple of the years here aren't really in our projection because they're already in this budget, or maybe the budget that they're going to vote on in a couple of months. But are we still apples and apples? Because most of his projections are based on a $20 million expenditure and not $26 million.
I will confirm that with him as such, and make sure we're dialed in there,
Okay.
so that the examples show the funding of all these projects that we're talking about. That's the question, right?
I think so. I
Okay.
just want to make sure that his comparisons and his spreadsheets which today this big handout that we all have is based on 20 million over 10 years or 9 years, correct?
I believe so.
Okay, and we came up with numbers today that basically are saying we want to spend 26 million over 10 years. So does that change these numbers at all? Does it change how much he needs to? It looks like the numbers would be the same, because on the $18 million budget, the 1050 into capital each year still covers us. So it looks like so we're within $1 million. We're within $1 million.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that million makes any difference.
Certainly,
to-
$1 million makes a difference. That's a big number. But I agree. Let me find out. I don't want to say yes or no for sure
Okay.
because I don't want to say. I'll find that out and confirm that we get an apples to apples comparison as well. So the issue also would be that, if he's got a 20-year repayment, it could be. I just don't know what magic he did in his formulas. He's got the Stifel report. I asked him to make sure it mirrored that, so there wasn't any contradictory numbers based upon taking, like I said, 15 million or 18 million or whatever number it was in one lump sum versus 3 payouts. I wanted them to mirror each other. And I guess the point about that is, remember when Stifel said, hey, we project this to cost $60 more for the average homeowner a year, right? When we really looked at this over the last couple days was, yeah, that's what it would cost if we were, in a capped situation where we didn't have any more capacity. But because we have the capacity, and we really, not so we don't have to go to bond, and you see if we don't go to bond, we go over the mill rate that's allowed, or we have to go to 325 earlier to make it all balance, at least in the next 10 years. That increase to the homeowner is greater than. So this is the kind of the best of both worlds. To me, this is the mixture of amortizing the debt service over a longer period of time. This is a pay-go option. Like I said, we may decide at some point that we're going to lease purchase a fire station in there, which could change some of these numbers because now you're lease paying over the 20 years versus the pay cash piece of this, right? Does that make sense what I'm saying? Again, it's 27 different scenarios we could put. This is trying to create an apple to an apple comparison of what we would do. If the bond doesn't pass, people have asked, what's your plan B? Our plan B would be no bond, obviously, because it didn't pass, and then some hybrid of pay-go, lease purchase, try to create options, and then create the prioritization schedule of which we've talked about, and whether that's fire trucks are going to have to last 20 years instead of 18 years because that's what's going to happen, and our maintenance costs will go up this much, and our reliability of vehicles will go down, and that'll be the world we'll have to live in if that's what has to happen. But if we can afford this and the community understands the plan, that's the beauty of going to the bond is they can understand the plan and help put us back on track and create a pathway for the future governing boards and fire chiefs to work within to create a situation where we don't find needing a bond again, unless hopefully just for capital buildings. That'd be the ideal. Like the water on the bridge part, we are here today where we are, and I can't talk about what happened then or who made that decision or why we did that. It doesn't matter. What matters is what our needs are today and what our needs are in the next 10 years. And how we're going to make that happen. And that's the question you have been posed, and I think you've done a great job addressing that.
Okay, it appears that we've finished our discussion on the draft report, and David, it sounds like you're clear on what you need to do to.
Between the three of us, we'll be clear.
Okay. Now, the question I have is this kind of works into item number 7 on the agenda for future meeting dates, but I know that Gene, you made a motion at the beginning of this meeting, and do we want to attempt to make another motion based on what we've done so far today, or wait until our next meeting when we have the final report in our hands? What's the preference of the committee?
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask, just put one thing in before you decide that. I would think at the next meeting, we would maybe have a few more members at the meeting, which may just help solidify that. I mean, so let us write the document, and if we have to come back on Thursday to review the document, make sure everything's clear. I know we don't want to have another meeting if we don't have to, but that might then afford, and take the vote then to formally adopt the recommendation with a few more people at the table might help solidify that. The hard part will be if any of those folks have different ideas that weren't here, we're back to the drawing board if they
Well,
create.
not necessarily, because it's
Six,
the,
a quorum.
yeah, the quorum would be there, so.
I get it. I mean, if,
I get
you know, no one wants to change in this group, but they have a great idea. That's the beauty of
Well,
hearing
I-
other folks.
My thoughts would be that we do take a vote for at least the dollar amount and then review the corrections and the draft report again. Because
You're off again.
that's where I'm,
I'm still on for now. My question is that, yes, we popped in that $18 million and we've all agreed on that. Is that an item that needs to be motioned and voted on, to Mrs. Maxwell's point? Because I think we've all, agreed on that. So I guess direction from the chair and maybe the chief, is that a motionable item?
or is just the report when it's completed. the,
Or just we're
motionable
giving
item?
our directional item where we give Mr. Waters the direction to pop in that 18 million, and then next meeting is the motion on the whole recommendation.
My preference would be to wait until the next meeting and just make one motion adopting everything.
It would
Is there
be- right,
consensus?
It would be redundant, because there's consensus that we're agreeing to the 18 in theory, and so, yeah, okay.
And I think it is important to have as many members here as possible when we make this very
I agree.
important decision, so.
Mr. Chair, I won't be here on Thursday,
Yes.
so not that it matters.
Mr. Chair,
Let's-
go ahead.
Okay.
So in light of Mrs. Johnson not being here, is there at least an opportunity that, Ms. Johnson, you'd like to at least express your thoughts or concerns to at least be on the record so we know?
I
where
agree
you
with the
stand?
report as amended, and I do agree with the 18 million, and I hope that vote stands.
So we can at least be comfortable in her absence that where her stance was. Thank you.
All right, any other comments or questions by committee members?
So board, are we looking at the 11th?
I'm sorry, I do have a question. What are the next steps about getting this to the board? Is that for the May board meeting, or is this going to be at the June board meeting?
So, man, I don't have the 11th on my calendar here. Oh, I do. I got 9 o'clock. I'm sorry. 9 o'clock on the 11th is what's scheduled.
Yeah, don't change that, or I
No.
won't be able to be.
Yeah, no, we're not changing it. I apologize for the typo with the confusion last time was just a typo. So your question, Betty, is what happens from here? I would think that at this point, we finish the draft. Dave finishes the draft. Tricia wordsmiths it. We get it out to you guys by, Dave's been really fast at this, so I mean, I'm hoping we'll get some to you guys by tomorrow afternoon, which will give you, Tuesday night, Wednesday. We'll be here Thursday morning. We'll have any final, if you have any words that just, I don't like this word or that word, just get it to us so we can at least have a couple drafts or something really pressing. We'll get that to the board in the board packet. Mr. Waters, as requested by the chair, will be presenting to the board a summarization. The board will get the copy of the recommendation
At the board, May
at the board meeting in May.
Okay.
What's that date?
May 17th. And then the board will have an opportunity to ask any questions or how do we get there or whatever they may have as it relates to 18 million, why we pick 18 million, whatever that may be.
Do you want all of us to be at that board meeting, or are we just gonna have you guys?
Well, I think it would be good if as many members as possible could be at that board meeting.
And I believe I stated before that I will not be in state. I'll be in Florida at that time, so I will be missing that one. And we do not live stream those.
We do not live stream, no.
Okay.
They get posted like the next morning, but it would be nice to have as many folks there. So if there is a question or there's, and again, this is a recommendation of the board. The board will make a decision as to what they think is the right thing for the district, but they'll, I'm sure, weigh your thoughts and opinions and the time you've taken to get to where you are. You've had a few board members pop in and out of the meetings. So they've had some opportunity, I'm sure, to be digesting this as we go along. I'm hoping that some of them have been watching these meetings as well, so that they're really, in tune with what's happening if they haven't been able to make them. And I've got some reason to believe that that's accurate. So they've been engaged in this process and hopefully are hearing and seeing the process you went through. So I wanted to finish this with this, and that is talking to CORE. I just said, hey, how do we kind of compare in relationship to your other groups that have, you've sat in on these types of meetings, and they both said, the work you're doing right now is incredibly important to the success of the bond. The level to which you've engaged and the questioning and the thoughtfulness that you guys are working through is incredibly high level and should demonstrate to folks that are concerned about what's happening that there's a lot of due diligence going on. And I'm taking some liberties in what they said, but give me the liberty to do that, please. So they just do this on a more frequent basis. This will be our one and done, I hope, for all of us in this room. But compared to those folks that do it frequently, they said the process we've been doing and the legwork and the amount of effort that's going into it should be recognized. And so I just want to recognize you all for taking the time, the professionalism and the input all of you have had from different angles have been very, very appreciative at so many levels. And the citizens that are not watching, are not here, but maybe are watching, or that may be concerned, certainly I hope that they'll have the ability to utilize, my reference will be, I'll answer any questions as chief, but I would recommend you talk to some folks on the committee. If you don't, believe it from me, you guys have very little vested interest other than a concerned citizen as to wanting to make sure emergency services are sustainable. And that's what it's really about. And you folks represented the community in this, and some staff members have some interest as far as, from a staff perspective, but you guys have done a great job. So thank you for the time. Dave, thank you for the hard work and the report writing you've done. It's been fabulous. I know some of your counterparts have commented already, but I just want to say thank you from staff's perspective. You saved us a lot of time. And most importantly, your work product has been fantastic. So kudos to all of you. So we'll be back on the 11th, 9 o'clock, with what will probably be a fairly short meeting to just finalize that agreement or the letter, and the formality of agreeing to the letter, which includes the 18 million number, will I think suffice that's what it is. So we'll work on the language for a motion, if you will, if that would make sense by somebody to incorporate that all.
Well, I want to thank you, Chief, and also thank the staff who have provided us just every bit of information that we needed in order to reach a conclusion and be prepared to make recommendations. So the consultants, everyone did a great job.
Well, thank you. We're working hard, working together, which was the key. Work in the same direction.
And one other thing, when you do have the board meeting, I know you will, but I'm just going to ask you to please remind everybody that they can review all the meetings online and watch everything. If they have questions first, come to us, of course, anytime, but come to Dave Waters. Otherwise, they can watch the TV, and then if they have any further questions, at least it'll be clear exactly what we said and did. I hope. Clearer.
That's it.
Cool.
Make a
Great.
Motion to
adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
We're adjourned.
Tricia, almost done with the meeting minutes.
Thank you.